The SBC, Southern Baptist Convention, it's happening right now. And the Southern Baptist elites, they continue to assure us that there's no liberal drift in the SBC. That's just your imagination. Meanwhile, they rallied the troops over this past year to vote down the law amendment that would have reserved the office of the pastorate exclusively, as the Bible says, for biblically qualified men. In addition to that, you also have things like Brent Leatherwood and the ERLC. Tom Askell actually brought a vote to the table to disband the ERLC, saying that it's not worth the Southern Baptist Convention giving a single dime to. They don't do anything in the realm of ethics. And what a coincidence, just a few hours after the SBC voted to maintain the ERLC and say, hey, they're doing great work, let's keep giving them the widow's mites. Right after that, the manifesto of the transgender shooter of Covenant School that happened over a year ago, it's been suppressed this entire time by Brent Leatherwood in large part and the ERLC, and it finally appears right after the SBC votes to say, let's keep the ERLC, they're doing great work. Then finally it manifests, this manifesto, it surfaces, and turns out absolutely shocking. Hang on to your seat. I know that it's going to throw you for a loop, but the transgender shooter was motivated by a hatred for Christians. And the Christian organization, ERLC, wanted Christians not to know that. Because at the end of the day, they would rather protect transgender ideology and use that as a lobbying moment to get rid of your Second Amendment gun rights than actually protect Christians from a heinous ideology that hates them. Tune in now.
All right, gentlemen. So this is it's breaking. This is happening just today. As you mentioned, the Southern Baptist Convention is going on, and the law amendment was voted down. And my heart goes out. There's a lot of really good, godly men that have spent the last year advocating for it. So to give a little bit of context, I mean, denominations, maybe I would be bullish long-term, but I'm bearish short-term. It's a rough look with the denominations really across evangelicalism and in the West as a whole. But the Southern Baptist Convention matters. The Southern Baptist Convention is the largest evangelical denomination in the United States. Catholics are bigger, unfortunately. We'll have to fix that too. But the SBC would be the largest evangelical Protestant denomination, about 47,000 churches, and they command significant resources, money, land, seminaries, this, that, or the other. And so whether you like it or not, if you're a Protestant and an evangelical, the SBC does matter. And so the SBC, what's been on the docket, the law amendment, was a proposed amendment to the constitution of the SBC. Now, the SBC is a little interesting. So it's not a Presbyterian structure where the organization and the denomination has authority over individual local churches. The SBC is committed to the autonomy of every local church. And what these churches do at the SBC is they agree to be in friendly cooperation with one another. So they send a portion of their tithe, a portion of their income to partner with things like NAM, the North American Mission Board, the SEND Network, the ethics arm of the SBC, like we just talked about, to cooperate. To cooperate on these different endeavors. So the way a local church maybe couldn't send out missionaries, but they could send money to an organization that did. The SBC is a collaboration in that sense. So each church is autonomous, but they agree together on the Baptist faith and message, agree on these different initiatives. And the law amendment, what it sought to do was to amend the constitution of the SBC to reserve and to render not in fellowship, not in friendly cooperation with the SBC, to render them not in friendly cooperation with the SBC, if they gave the office of pastor, the title of pastor, to any women. So the Baptist faith and message already says that the office of pastor is reserved for men, and this addition to the Constitution would enshrine into the very document that dictates all of SBC policy and guidance, would dictate that any church that gave that title out would be rendered non-fellowship with the convention and functionally disbarred. There is a mechanism for this to happen already. So Saddleback Church, Rick Warren, they were kicked out last year. Personally, I would kick them out just because Rick Warren is insufferable. But they were kicked out for having women pastors. He very conveniently came to that position as it became popular. They also kicked out First Baptist Church of Jacksonville this year. So there is a mechanism in place. And the argument was, well, we already have a mechanism in place. So why do we need to enshrine into the Constitution? Why do we need to put front and center this guard against giving giving the title of pastor, the title of reverend, the title of minister to women.
Why
I think
not?
it cuts both ways. Why not?
Why not?
Exactly.
What are you trying to maintain? Yeah.
Well, and the thing is that process that's already in, that has been used, is cumbersome. And as you're going to show in a few minutes here, Wes, if they were to have to go through that entire process as it stands now for all the churches that have designated women as pastors, that is going to be a huge drain on time, resources, energy, and it could be done much more quickly, and it could also, in a culturally relevant moment, make a stand to not only the world. I saw a USA Today headline: SBC votes to keep, or fails to keep women from the pastorate, or something like that. And so the world's take is, oh yeah, these Christian guys, they're all for women's rights and egalitarianism. But it also sends a message to the rest of the churches in the SBC that this is like shape up or ship out.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So in the Southern Baptist Convention, an amendment to the Constitution has to pass 2 successive years in a row. So you can't just bring the bus around the block like the Democrats do, load everyone up, rolling in an off year, amend the Constitution. You have to pass it 2 successive years in a row. So last year, the law amendment passed with 80%. I think this is in Anaheim, California.
86 or 87%.
It was high.
It was high.
Yep.
Yeah.
Passed last year. It needs 2/3 majority. It failed by 4% this year. They got 61%, 62% of the vote. It needed 66% for the amendment to pass and actually be enshrined into it. Right. And that is a failure. Like you said, like the actual technicalities of it. Well, we have a mechanism for removing these churches, or we have already in the Baptist Faith and Message this, that, or the other. But the optics of it are, well, now welcome to more churches. Goodbye to the conservative churches.
Right.
And welcome to the churches that are a little soft on this. Welcome to the churches that they'll have a woman maybe as a youth minister or a children's pastor or worship pastor. And then the response will be, well, this isn't happening, right? The 3 stages almost of subversion is, this isn't happening. Okay, maybe it is, but not that much. It is happening, and it's good that it is. Right. American Reformer, great organization. They pulled the numbers. It's been a couple months ago. They actually went through something like 4,000 SBC churches and calculated the percentage of them that gave the title of pastor to some woman on staff or serving in some ministry capacity. And they estimated that of the 47,000 SBC churches here in the United States, that it would be about 1,300 churches would employ about 1,800 women as pastors. So this is going to real websites with real churches that actually have the title of pastor. This is not just a guess. They extrapolated the data out based on a random sample. And so now you have 1,200 churches with women as pastors on staff, and they have just been told, welcome, pull up a seat, sit over by the fireplace. We want you here. And then to the good, godly men in churches, I think of Tom Askel's church down in Florida, to churches like that have been fighting and want to hold on conservative principles. They've in many ways been shown the door. You can stay here. You can keep giving your money to the ERLC and keep giving money to NAM and the Send Network. But as far as ideologically, you are going to be more and more and more dwarfed by these churches that give this title out like candy, that ordain women to the pastorate. Some of these, you can pull up the graph actually, Nathan, that'd be helpful. Some of these are, the woman is the senior pastor. Yeah. So this is a graph of the estimated prevalence of a woman holding these roles. Youth, children, family pastor is the most common. That would be likely, if you're just listening to this, over 400 women serving in this capacity. Associate assistant pastor, a little bit under 400 women.
That's high. Associate pastor, assistant pastor.
That's
not just
position.
Some woman leading Sunday school, which is very common in the SBC, whether or not we would agree with it or not.
Yep, exactly. So associate pastor on
that's
staff.
Basically second in command in most cases.
Yep. Miscellaneous pastor is just as common. You have worship pastor, again, not a biblical role. That would be probably about 150 churches. But up here, again, if you're listening, co-pastor, senior pastor, elder, executive pastor, co-pastor with their husband. There's about 100 churches estimated of each of these. So you have 500 SBC churches led by either at a co-pastor level, co-pastoring with their husband, or led by as the senior pastor, executive pastor, these women in office. And we've seen this time and time again. The Anglican Church on decline, the PCUSA on decline. I could name so many denominations, and where it started was not even full-blown allowing it, but just a softness to it.
It was just,
We
in
wouldn't
fact,
wanna
it just
kick them
started with,
out.
we just want to have a conversation about it.
That's-
We
yeah,
just
that's all
want
it
to
says, yeah.
explore what the Bible says about it and just make sure that we're on the up and up here. And that conversation has preceded an embrace of egalitarianism, which has led inevitably in many, many denominations, not all of them, but many, many of them, to where we are now, where they're embracing and supporting LGBTQ members and even pastors.
Yep. That's the old running joke with Presbyterians. They say when Presbyterians are getting ready to compromise, the first thing they do is they form a study committee. Like we're just starting the conversation. We're just studying the issue. We're just, which is really just another way of saying we are ready to rebel against the Word of God. And but we know that if we're going to do that, it needs to look scholarly. It needs to look, it needs to be academic. But we are absolutely, that's what we're heading towards, is compromise. I've got to just say, though, I'd be remiss if I didn't admit that right now I feel like somewhere in the world that the Joker and Lex Luthor are on a phone call with each other saying, is there any way we can get Brent Leatherwood as hired on to the payroll as a consultant? Because we're devious and we want to see the world burn in flames, but that guy, he makes us look like knights in shining armor by comparison. I think about that you are able to hijack a mass shooting and suppress the manifesto for over a year,
Joel, will you unpack
and it
that a
doesn't
little
come
bit?
out until after you get voted.
So the ERLC
amazing.
was involved in suppressing the release of that manifesto. Is that right?
It's Brent
Yes.
Leatherwood in his personal capacity. He's
Okay.
the trustee, actually, that property. I think he actually pressured the parents to give it to him on the condition that he would safeguard it. So this wasn't him acting in his capacity necessarily as the ERLC. It was him acting as a parent. I think he actually had children at the school.
Okay.
But he also employs the ERLC's resources. We saw this in Louisiana when they wrote against
Right.
an abortion abolition bill. Different staff, different resources of the ERLC are no doubt put to use in these different things that they've done.
Yeah, whether it's stopping the abolition of abortion or whether it's using transgender ideology as a way not to point out the dangers of the LGBT agenda, but rather to try to strip away from conservatives and Christians their Second Amendment right. The different goals, different day, but one common denominator you can count on Brent Leatherwood somewhere behind the scenes, pulling the levers, and then on the side he's got his consulting business where he helps out, some of his peers like the Joker and Lex Luthor, So that the guy is a snake.
And
Yes.
no doubt bringing in, Russell Moore preceded him, a nice salary paid for by your grandma in the Southern Baptist Church,
Right.
tithing.
On her fixed income. Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
All right. So in terms of this week's NGMI award, I'm not going to make it. The SBC. It breaks my heart.
Yeah.
I'm not rooting for their demise, but
Yeah.
my goodness.
Yeah.
I know, we've got lots of friends, good
Yeah.
guys in the SBC who have been fighting the good fight. It's just demoralizing.
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
they've been saying, since 2015, or a lot of guys hopped on board in 2019, and every year, they go and they get their butts kicked, and then all right, let's and then a whole year of work of let's
Yeah.
rally, let's
Yep.
save the SBC. And for the record, for those who are well, why even try? Society does need institutions.
Right.
I wrote, a little book, Fight by Flight, but primarily applying that principle to leaving, states, a geographic fleeing, like leaving California, because by virtue of just being a resident of California, there's a state tax, you have to pay it, it goes towards certain things like Planned Parenthood. You are fiscally supporting abortion if you are merely just a resident in the state of California, and you have a choice not to be. You could live somewhere else. But with the SBC, to be fair, some of these guys are, they're faithful pastors, faithful men. Their local churches are in the SBC, but you can opt out of a lot of the giving programs.
Right.
You can designate specifically what your portion of tithes that go to the SBC, what it's going to go to. So these guys They're not fighting the ERLC while simultaneously funding the very thing that they're fighting, but they're being strategic, good stewards of the tithes and offerings of the saints, and saying, nope, it will not go to NAM, it will not go to the ERLC, it will not go to this or that. We are going to give the minimum, absolute minimum, in order to maintain our voting rights, so that we can go to the convention and try to see improvement in some of these areas. So we'll give the minimum so that we can keep and maintain our messengers to go to the convention and cast our votes in a biblical direction. And we'll give the absolute minimum, and with the minimum we're giving, we'll give to the things that do the absolute least harm. And so if that's you and you're in the SBC and here you are, 5th year in a row saying, all right, let's rally again, maybe next year's our year. I feel for you. I don't want to disparage you. You're probably already black-pilled and discouraged enough. I think that that's a valiant effort. And I just want to, make the point that that is different in terms of, being a resident of California. In California,
right.
You can say, well, I'm in California because I'm fighting. Okay, but by virtue of living there as a resident, legally, you are not just fighting, you are funding. You must fund. So I feel like, the best way to fight a state like California is, there were 6 million voters for Trump. 6 million, 12 million for Biden. It wasn't even close, but 6 million for Trump in the 2020 presidential election. If they left, just less than 1%, I think it's like 47 or 48,000. If less than 1% of them left and went to some of the 3 or 4 swing states out of the 7 that were contested between Trump and Biden, I think like Michigan and Arizona and Nevada, if just 48,000, less than 1% of the 6 million Trump voters left and went to those 3 or 4 states respectively, then through the Electoral College, Trump would be the president. It would be a different world. Not that Trump's the best guy in the world, but goodness gracious, by comparison to Biden, he's a saint. And so there really is something to be said there. And if all 6 million left, then California would implode overnight. Financially, they could not take that hit. And the longer you stay, the more time you're giving to Gavin Newsom to formulate laws to actually financially penalize you if you leave in the future. So it's like, well, it's not bad enough yet. They haven't outlawed homeschooling yet. Right. They will. They absolutely will. So we're going to stay. But the problem is that when you make that decision to leave, leaving may be a lot harder than it is today. If you're a small business owner or whatever it may be, and you're established, set up with your LLC in the state of California, it may be that you have to chop off a massive piece of your total funds and leave that behind, and you can't take it with you. So anyways, my point is fight by flight. I left California, moved to Texas. I don't think it's a 1-to-1 ratio when it comes to leaving a state like California geographically versus in terms of affiliation, leaving a denomination like the SBC, especially in Baptist world with the SBC, because you really can be shrewd and strategic and give an absolute minimum amount of dollars, right? You can't do that with Gavin Newsom. You can't be in California and say, well, I would like to opt out of this fund and that fund. Right. No. You're paying the state tax. It is what it is. You want to get out of it? Great. You can go to jail. Those are your options, jail or pay the tax. Whereas in the SBC, you absolutely can maintain your voting power by being a member and having your messengers, but also limit your giving and also designate your giving. And so all that being said, my point is for guys who feel like, I want to continue to fight because the SBC it represents, hundreds of millions of dollars, if not, I think, billions of dollars. And these dollars belong to the Lord. They've been given by the Lord's people. It's the widow's mites, all collectively from millions of people gathered together and saying, hey, we don't want to just forfeit that because, we want to be good stewards. They're trying to steal God's money, and we'd like to keep it. We don't want them to be able to rob God, at least not easily.
Financial transparency was voted down too.
I know. Yeah. So, could we just at least know where the money's going? You sure can't. Nope.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So can we disband the ERLC after they've suppressed this manifesto and from a transgender shooter who explicitly hates Christians? We knew it all along, but they hid it so that we didn't know definitively, and also shot down abolition because at the end of the day, what does the ERLC stand for? The that, the chance of mothers to murder their children. That's where they draw a line in the sand, and financial transparency. We'd like to at least, if you're going to punch us in the face, could you tell us right before you do it? We'd just like to know where you're going to punch us, how hard you're going to punch us. Nope. It will continue to be a surprise, no accountability whatsoever. So anybody who wants to leave the SBC, number one, God bless you. I don't blame you. But anybody who wants to stay, see point A and everything that I articulated, the fight by flight principle, I think it can apply, but I don't think that it must apply. I would not be nearly as stringent in the way that I would apply that to Christians living in Manhattan versus the Baptist pastor who's being shrewd and faithful and trying to change the SBC, because we need institutions. Desperately, we need institutions, and the institutions that we already have, they were built by conservative Christians. Yep. All of their funds and all of their accolades and all of their assets and seminaries and all these different things were built by our fathers. And so to say that, well, our fathers, they bled for this, and they pinched pennies, and they were generous and did this and did that, and so from a fifth commandment kind of principle, I feel like I need to stay and continue fighting as long as I can. That's great, because in the SBC you can fight without funding. You can remain fighting without funding, at least to an extent. California, your mere presence, it may allow you, by your presence, to continue fighting, but it also forces you to continue funding. And you could be outside of California and continue to fight in other ways and fund not at all. So all that being said, if you're in California, don't be stupid, leave. And if you're in the SBC and you want to leave, I feel you. No judgment here. But if you want to stay, also, I feel you. No judgment.
Yeah. And some guys will be dogmatic. You've got to stay. You've got to fight. This is
right.
The Reconquista.
You don't have to
You
stay.
don't. And I would say, too, I think of J. Gresham Machen. So the Presbyterian
Princeton
denomination was folding on missions. They're like, well, we don't have to affirm the Trinity, the exclusivity of Christ. We're interested in social programs. And he created his own alternative missions board and sought funding from it. And they defrocked him. So he tried the fighting aspect. It didn't work. Well, then he went and fled. And he founded Westminster Seminary and the OPC, and neither of those have even rivaled a tenth of the power that old Princeton had. Neither works. This is why we need to get back political power. So stay or go, merit in both, fight the good fight. Neither of them, I don't think will work. It's not as though max exodus from the SBC is going to magically create a new conservative SBC. No. That's not going to happen. And I don't think in the short term Christians are going to win it.
It could be pure and it could be beautiful, but it will not even begin to rival
all 27 of your churches.
Yeah, all
will be
27,
pure and beautiful and conservative,
that's
and that's
right.
not nothing. The saints in
We're
their matter.
not saying that's bad. Like, there's freedom of conscience to do that, and some probably will be called to do that, to form a new Baptist alliance that's explicitly biblical, and that's great. Praise God for that. But for the guy who's saying, yeah, but I don't want to just start the pure version that is a tenth or even, let's be honest, a hundredth of the size.
Right.
I want to try to keep this thing that was pure and that's massive and that our fathers gave their lives for. That's also admirable. All right, any final thoughts from you guys? If not, there's one more thing that I want to address.
Is it messengers?
No, it's not that.
We'll bring up messengers then. We were talking just before we actually went live about the irony that the SBC allows women to be sent as messengers, to cast a vote as messengers. And I don't know, we were just playing around with some numbers. We don't have data for this, but understanding that women are, in general, more susceptible to being convinced or deceived, and having heard some of the speeches that were made by SBC leadership at the convention. I mean, they're obviously skilled expositors, skilled speakers, very good at presenting their case and putting forward the reasons why we ought not vote for the law amendment. We were just, again, we don't have any hard data, but curious what it would be if all the members or the messengers had been men, about how many of them would not have been able to be swayed in the bottom of the ninth inning. You show up, you're resolved, I know what I'm going to do. Then the people give their speeches.
Right.
Am I getting a cave? Am I going to switch?
Female messengers were there? Do we know?
Someone estimated around 30%.
Yeah.
And the vote
30%.
for the law amendment was close.
It was,
so if you had 30% of women and they broke 70-30 against it, even 60-40 probably, that was the deciding factor.
Right. Because the law amendment, for one, this was not a simple majority vote, right? This was a
two-thirds.
two-thirds, supermajority, two-thirds vote. And it was close. I think those who were for the law amendment, which would have ensured, biblically qualified male pastors, was like 60%.
61.
61. It needed to be 66.6 plus 1.
Right.
So they weren't far off. They were 5% away.
It was about 500 votes.
I think so, 500 to 600.
So they were 5% away, which represented 500 or 600 votes. And we're saying 30% of the messengers were women. So total women's votes estimated. So total women's votes, tell me if I'm wrong, but that would have been about 1,000 or so.
If not a little bit higher.
If not even
3 to 4
higher.
grand.
Maybe, okay. Oh, 3,000 or 4,000?
How many total messengers are there? It's over 10,000.
It's over 10,000?
I mean, it depends on the year. I don't know how many this year.
I think 8,000 came last year, and I think there's up to 15,000 messengers this year. Depends who all's in the room, so not every single person is in the room. But I think it's over 10,000, so that would be 2,000 to 3,000 women.
Okay, so let's say 2,000 or 3,000, being conservative, it could have been more, but 2,000 or 3,000, definitely more than what I said, 1,000. So 2 or 3 times that, 2,000 or 3,000 women's votes. They only lost by 5%, which represented 500 votes.
Yep.
So we got a loss for the law amendment, ensuring that men are called by God to be pastors, and lose that vote by 500. And from what we can tell, you've got 2,000 to 3,000 votes being cast by women. I think that checks out, Chief.
Yep.
I think
women
I know
of
what
both
happened.
genders too.
Women of both genders, of course.
There are some of those,
of course.
So there's 30% women, and then there's
I think this
10
is
to 15%.
This is speculative, but I don't think it's mere speculation. I think it's a pretty safe bet. I'd be willing to take out a second mortgage on the house, put all the money down. I would make that bet. Every day and twice on Sunday. Women made this happen. So, that's not good. Any other final thoughts?
Nope.
No. Okay. Well, this is what I want to do real quick here at the end. I would be remiss if I did not tell you guys about our upcoming conference. Okay. So I had the privilege and pleasure of just speaking. Go ahead.
Before you do that, we're doing our regularly scheduled live cast right after this one.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
That's
so this
an
one is
announcement
just kind of an emergency.
Right. This was an
breaking
emergency.
news.
The SBC. Now it wasn't. Hey, here's shocking news. It was here's breaking news, but it was not shocking news. Breaking news. The SBC disappointed us again. So, so you probably felt it coming, but it's nice to just definitively say for certain the SBC let you down, and it's like, oh, okay, good. So we're going to live stream right after this, and we're going to be dealing with Pride
Month,
and Pride Month and the month of June. And so Michael wrote a great article for that, and so we're going to immediately switch it over as soon as we're done to the live stream on that topic. But here at the end, I just wanted to say we just had the new Christendom conference, which was a blessing. I had the privilege of being one of the speakers, along with Chase Davis, Dr. Stephen Wolf, Dr. Joe Rigney, and then the Ogden, Utah guys, Brian Sauvé, Eric Kahn, Dan Burkholder, and Ben Garrett. And that was awesome. There was probably the largest, moment, with the most people in the room at the same time. To me, I got a rough count, probably about 950, close to 1,000 people, which is phenomenal. Awesome. Our conference that we had back in March, we had about 850, close to 900 people. So there really is, I think, an appetite for a masculine, muscular Christianity that's not limp-wristed, that's not wishy-washy. And hopeful, eschatology that's filled with optimism, that we're going to make it, we're so back, those kind of things. Like, may this light be a we're so back, in the dark of it's so over, when all other we're so backs go out, that kind of conference. So anyways, it was great. A lot of people were blessed. I was blessed to be there. And we announced, at their conference, our upcoming conference, which they will be at. So we're going to have all the Ogden boys. We'll have Brian Sauvé, Ben Garrett, Eric Kahn, Dan Burkholder. We're also going to have, there it is right there on the screen if you're watching, we're going to have Dr. Stephen Wolf, and we're going to have Andrew Isker, who's the author of The Boniface Option. We're going to have Orrin McIntyre. He's from the Blaze Network and just published his book, which I keep hearing is fantastic. I plan to read it soon, The Total State. Pastor Jeff Durbin with Apologia. Then we've got Steve Dace, who's also on the Blaze Network. Steve does great work. He's as far as I can tell, he's maybe a little bit dispensational. He's like dispensational evangelical. He's kind of your normie theological. But here's the thing I love about Steve and why I invited him, and I'm honored he's going to be there because if there are some dispensational guys who have black-pilled and just hey, we're going to lose and Jesus is coming back next Thursday. That ain't Steve Dace. Nope. He is a fighter through and through, and grateful for him. He's going to be there. Pull it back one more time, Nathan. We've also got John Harris from Conversations That Matter. I'm excited about him coming. A.D. Robles, my boy, he's on the board here with Right Response Ministries. He's coming. We've got the Christian Prince himself, Oklahoma State Senator Dusty Devers. He's going to be there. And then we've got Zach Garris, who has been going through the ringer online lately for some of his comments, which, spoiler alert, Zach believes what every Christian always believed until 15 minutes ago. And then we've got also Mr. David Reese. He is the CEO of Armored Republic. He's also a local pastor. Great work theologically, and I'm having him on our show regularly about every 6 weeks to talk about civil covenanting, ecclesiastical covenanting, and Christian nationalism and theonomy and all these kinds of things. So it's going to be, I think, a fantastic conference, and we wanted to make it cheap. So this is a little bit different than what we've done in the past. This is going to be our longest conference. What we've been doing is 2 days, Friday, half a day on Friday, starting in the afternoon, and then full day Saturday, and then kind of rolling over into the Lord's Day. But this is a whole extra day. So it's going to be Thursday and Friday and Saturday, and of course, anybody who wants to stay for the Lord's Day is welcome. But you get a whole extra day. You get 15 speakers, so an all-star cast, massive lineup, probably 2.5 times the amount of speakers, a whole extra day in terms of sessions and content and length of the conference. But even though you're getting exponentially more, it is the cheapest price we've ever done. So I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe for our last conference, Blueprints for Christendom 2.0 that we just held in March, I think the early bird price for that was $150. And then we did regular price was $200. This is for an adult. And then the late registration was $250. But for this, instead of $150, $200, $250, we're doing $130, $170, $200. So significantly cheaper. So right now you can, or $140, $170, $200. So right now you can go and register at rightresponseconference.com, not rightresponseministries.com/conference, but rightresponseconference.com. You can go and register right now at the early bird price, which again is $140 for an adult, and come and be with us. It's in April of 2025. April of 2025, going to be in Temple, Texas. You would fly in, if you're coming from out of town, fly into Austin, Texas. We're in Georgetown, which is about 45 minutes north of Austin, and Temple is about an hour. So you'd fly into Austin, you'd have about a 55 minute drive. Lots of hotels. We're going to be blocking off hotels where all the guys in the conference can be staying, in the same hotel, and just fellowshipping and feasting and celebrating the goodness of God and encouraging one another to go and defeat Trash World. So I guess that's the last thing, is the title of the conference is Christ is King, subtitle, How to Defeat Trash World. We need to know what time it is, and we need to be honest about that, not foolish or naive. We are living in Trash World. They want you to live in the pod. They want you to eat the bugs. So we need to recognize, no, things are bad. Everything is not fine. Things are bad. We are not going to do the SBC elites. Everything's fine. There's no liberal drift. No. It's terrible. But also we can win. By the grace of God, Amen. We can win. So register for that again, rightresponseconference.com. Thank you guys for tuning in, and let's be praying for the SBC, for God's mercy, but also as a form of God's mercy, his appropriate and just judgment, particularly on the snakes in the SBC. It's not... Drift doesn't just happen. That's right. This, we don't have time here at the end, but elite theory, there's something there, right? It's not just that in the 1950s, the conservative Christian housewives, got together and said, what we love in our black and white television shows? Just a little bit more gay sex. Right? And then, Hollywood said, well, we weren't planning on it, but, capitalism, we got to give the people what they want. That's not how it works. Yeah. Seriously, it's always the elites and leaders, right? Federal headship is a thing, and not just for the home with a father, but even at a national level, culturally, politically, at every level, there are leaders. And when the sheep begin to stray, it is often because of bad shepherds who led them away from still waters, away from green pastures. It's shepherds for hire. You know, it's Ezekiel talks about, you know, these shepherds that only serve themselves. You know, they're eating the rams and eating the sheep, but they don't actually care for them. They don't love them. Or they're the hired hand in John chapter 10, where, you know, some kind of threat comes in and they either lead them right into the mouth of the bear or the lion, or at best they flee, and the sheep are mauled and scattered. And so what's happening in the SBC is not just that all the widows in the pews, you know, got together and said, you know what, we're done with male pastors. Right. You know what, 1 Timothy 3 doesn't really matter to us anymore. You know what, that's not how it works. That is not how the world works. Not in a denomination, not in a state, not in a country. That is not how the world works. If you think that's how the world works, that it's just 50% of the population plus one that just, you know, randomly chose to drift, you know, left last week, and now it's reflected in our, you know, with our political leaders through elections, then you really need to grow up, Peter Pan. It's not Halloween, you know, Count Chocula. You need to grow up and put your big boy pants on and learn how the world works. Leaders co-op. That's what happens. Bad men at the top, they co-op. That doesn't mean the sheep are exonerated from moral culpability. So that doesn't mean that everybody's innocent and that God won't hold us responsible. But God designed his world with hierarchy. There are leaders at the top, and these leaders, guess what? Shocking, they lead. And they either do it well or they lead poorly. And they do it even maliciously in a sinister direction. And so the SBC has been co-opted in many ways and is being led in a bad direction. So we need to pray for mercy for the SBC as a whole, but as a form or a portion of that mercy, my prayer is for harsh, strict judgment for those shepherds for hire, that God in his mercy would either cause them to repent. That's the first option. I really do pray, and that's my heart's desire. First option is I pray that Brent Leatherwood and these guys repent. If not, though, I pray that in God's mercy, that these guys would be removed, that they would be removed from the SBC, either from just happenstance or a vote or whatever that might be, or maybe removed from the SBC by getting hit by a truck. You know, I'm not saying anybody should do that, but however God's got to do it to spare the sheep that he loves, I absolutely pray that God would remove the wolves. And there are wolves in the SBC, and we should pray. We should pray for God's judgment. Yeah. So, all right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope it's been helpful. And we're gonna shut down and literally in 30 seconds pick it right back up. So if you want to stay on the line and hear a little bit about Pride Month and how we got here and how bad it actually is, then stay tuned.